All right, so top 25 football playoff little preview is going to be tonight on ESPN, where they basically go through and release how teams are going to be in the rankings. And like, there's going to be like, if you look at the AP polls every week, it's going to be definitely different than how the AP polls are. Because like, if you look at the AP poll this week, right now, you'll see Alabama, Georgia, then you'll see Ohio State. And to me, I think that the committee will move Ohio State down a little bit. I think they'll definitely have to be below Oklahoma. But see, Iowa State, the way Iowa State's been playing lately, has really helped Oklahoma out because, the first year we looked at that as like, dang, you lost to Iowa State, man, that's a bad loss. Well, the fact that Iowa State has knocked off TCU, Tech, Oklahoma, those are some big wins for them. And they were in the top 25 last week, and then that's going to really help them bolster up with the win over TCU. But let's just talk about the top 25. I want to obviously Alabama is going to be the number one team. Alabama's been the most pristine this far. They were one of those top four teams that kind of had a pass in a sense, like they were going to be our top four. If they go undefeated. So Alabama is our one. Just the unit that they are. No surprise there. Georgia is two. I like Georgia. I've been very impressed with Georgia this year. They've been slaughtering all their opponents that they've been playing lately, and a team that usually a team like let's talk about Miami. Like if Miami in their rivalry game like against Florida State, we know Florida State's bad. They even had trouble with Florida State. You thought the Florida game was a game Georgia might have a little bit of issues with it being a rivalry and whatnot, but they passed. Notre Dame, I have them at 3. Main reason I have Notre Dame at 3 is they are 7-1. Their one loss is to Georgia. It was a 1-point loss at home. So, it does suck that they lost at home. But, they'd be 8-0 if they wouldn't have lost to Georgia. Georgia obviously is a really good team at 8-0. And so I've got Notre Dame at 3. Big wins over USC, another big win against NC State last week. I like what I've seen out of Notre Dame this year, and I think it'll continue. We've got question marks for the Stanford game, just because Bryce Love is going to be a part of that. They got Wake Forest this next week, which they don't sleep. Wake Forest doesn't sleep. They're always going to come and play each week. Good defense on them. So maybe a little bit of a surprise, but 4, I'm going to go with Clemson. If you want to use they're the defending national champs. This is why I have them. I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to say, in the games that Clemson's played this year, they've looked absolutely dominant. The game they lost their quarterback when they lost at the same time as when they lost the game in a sense around halftime. When we talk about Syracuse, the way they played against Miami, they would have beat Miami if they wouldn't have shot themselves in the foot. And the Clemson game is an example of them not shooting themselves in the foot. I think, Clemson played a really good Syracuse team on that day. I think it surprised a lot of people. I think it made a lot of people go, oh, well, Clemson lost, and they lost to a bad team. I can move them down my board. But if you watch Clemson week to week, they dominate their opponent. If you're going to tell me that there's a better defense of team in the nation, maybe Alabama, maybe Georgia, Notre Dame, maybe the teams that are above them. But they've got a really good defense, and I like them at my 4 spot because I do think that an ACC team will get a spot in the playoff. Now, Notre Dame, since they play an ACC schedule, they may take away that spot. They may take Clemson's spot away if they remain undefeated. And the way they played against the ACC this year, I think Notre Dame could take a spot. But at the same time, with the way that the Big Ten's going to get a spot, I'd be surprised to see 2 SEC teams in it. But if enough teams lose, we'll see 2 SEC schools in it. But Alabama or Georgia is going to receive a loss. They're going to play each other eventually. So, so you're looking at Alabama, you're looking at an ACC or Notre Dame, and then you're looking at basically the Big 12 or a Big 10 school, and probably a Big 10 team. Or in a Big 12. The way it's looking right now is we're looking like nobody in the Pac-12 is going to make it. And I would be surprised if someone out of the Big 12 makes it too. Pac-12 and Big 12 probably are the odd men looking out. Mainly for the way that Notre Dame's played this year, that's taken a spot away. And then, the Pac-12, they've lost too many games early. Washington was kind of like their last hope, and then they lost a bad game to Arizona State. That didn't help. The Big 12 is just tough because those teams are going to beat each other up each week. We don't really know which two are going to come out, and they'll probably come out with like 2 losses, and it won't be enough to make the playoff. So let's go down our list, though. I've got Oklahoma at 5. Maybe a bit of a surprise to have Oklahoma this high, because my first 4 teams were kind of they're kind of these are the best 4 teams at this time. And, to have Oklahoma at 5, I just have to have Oklahoma above Ohio State. In my mind, that's how it works for me. And, I got them at 5 right now. They basically control their own destiny. A bad loss to Iowa State, which was looking better and better each week. And they have the win over Ohio State. That gets them that has them bragging rights over Ohio State. If Wisconsin loses to Ohio State later, they'll have bragging rights over that. They have bragging rights over Penn State. So they have multiple rights to that spot. And now the big problem, though, with Oklahoma is they have to still face teams like Oklahoma State, TCU, and whoever they have to face in the Big 12 championship game. That's the more, but they do control their own destiny in a sense. I think that Oklahoma will be one of the teams in the Big 12 championship game. Ohio State, big win against Penn State this last week. I have them at my 6th spot. They've won all their games since their loss to Oklahoma. I don't see them losing any more games this year. They're going to have a Big Ten game. Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, which I think they win. So I have them at 6. These 6 teams are definitely going to be in talk for the playoff for the rest of the year. These top 6. Now Wisconsin. If Wisconsin continue to win, they never look necessarily bad, but they don't ever kill anybody, and that's part because they play in the Big Ten and a low scoring conference. But when you think about how solid they are running the ball, it's pretty scary. They're kind of in a sense like Miami. Miami hadn't played anybody this year. I don't really know what I can gravitate towards to put you higher. So 7 is where I've got Wisconsin, and like I've said, I think they'll win out this year. May have a tough game against Michigan. Michigan's looked bad, continue to look bad throughout the year, or worse throughout the year. That may be their toughest game before the Ohio State game that they have. I've got Penn State at 8. Penn State close behind Ohio State. If Ohio State makes any blunders, I think Penn State should jump them or, be right there for that spot. If Ohio State does have any blunders, I think Penn State would be the representative of the Big Ten championship game. It could help them if they could win against Wisconsin in a Big Ten championship game. But this is kind of how I've been looking at it all year. Who cares about what Penn State's done all year if they can't get back past Ohio State? I didn't really ever see them getting past Ohio State. I don't know why. That's just how it was. TCU, I have TCU at 9 at 7-1. Tough loss against Iowa State. Iowa State's looked better and better as the year's gone on. So, I didn't drop them too much, but I got them at 9 behind Penn State, above Oklahoma State. I got Oklahoma State at 10. I've really liked Oklahoma State. I'd probably have Oklahoma State above TCU if they wouldn't have lost to TCU. But if Oklahoma State wouldn't have lost to TCU, they'd be 8-0, and they'd probably be in my top 3 because I really like Oklahoma State. But Oklahoma State's at 10. Very good team. Scores a lot of points. Pretty good defense. Played really good against West Virginia this last week. They got Oklahoma, so another big game. One of these teams is going to drop out of the top 10 after this week. We'll see which one it is. I've kind of predicted that Oklahoma State wins, but at the same time, it's really hard for me to see Oklahoma not being there at the end of the year. So we'll see what happens. I got Virginia Tech at 11. I like what I've seen out of Virginia Tech. 1 loss is to Clemson. Tough game. They got handled, though. To me, they're 7-1. They've won most of their games. And I honestly like them better than Miami. I think they're going to beat Miami this week. So I'm going Virginia Tech at 11. 12, I've got Miami. Maybe a little bit of a surprise that I have Miami as low as I have Miami. But Miami is as low as they are because the teams that they've played and how they played against them. A 1-point win against Georgia Tech. I think a 4-point win against Florida State. They won by 5 last week to North Carolina, who's 1-7. They just hadn't really been impressive this year. An 8 point win over Syracuse at home. I just have not been impressed with Miami this year. I know they're dealing with injuries also. Um, I think they lose the next 2 weeks and kind of drop out of the power top right here because they've got Virginia Tech and Notre Dame in the next consecutive weeks. Washington Huskies, they would probably be higher. They probably should be more with the Penn States, the TCUs, and the Oklahoma States up there. But, the Arizona State loss is just a tough one to swallow. It's going to be tough for them to bounce back from because when you look back on their schedule, you see that really weak loss that they had. The only thing that's going to help Washington out is if they just kill everybody these last couple weeks, kill Washington State, kill Stanford, kill Oregon this week. If they can kill the last couple teams that they play and really make it look like, hey, we can do something, or hey, we can. That's where Washington. That's where Washington definitely can move up. If teams are going to lose, they're going to move up that way. But I don't really see Washington being able to get back into it the way they would want to. Auburn's a team, that loss to LSU was really tough. Think about if they wouldn't have that loss, they'd be up there with the TCUs and the Penn States. But they're 6-2. I got them at 14. They basically have to have a lot of teams lose. They need a big win against Alabama later in the year. I think they played Georgia also, if I'm not mistaken, later. So there's some games to help them move up. But if they can't move up, they're basically the best 2-loss team, I would say, out there. Losses to LSU and then losses to Clemson. UCF is 7-0. The Golden Knights I got them at 15. I didn't want to have them too high to start off with. I feel like, there's a couple of teams that are probably a little bit better than them that have losses. But I have them at 15. If they continue to win, they'll continue to move up. They'll probably be around like 9 or 8 by the end of the year if they go undefeated. So I like what I've seen out of them. Very good offense, very good defense. Scott Frost is doing a great job at UCF. So I got Iowa State at 16. So Iowa State's a team that wasn't even in my top 25. They were probably 26 last week. I decided not to put them in because I thought they'd lose to TCU and then drop back out. So I didn't put them in last week. But, they won that game. It helped them, made them look even better. I've got them at 16 now. And if they continue to win, they'll continue to move up. I'm not getting too crazy about Iowa State. If Iowa State continues to win, then great. But, they got West Virginia next on the schedule. They still haven't played Oklahoma State. Those are 2 tough games. We'll see how they play there. But their defense has been tremendous. Kyle Kemp 4-0 against TCU, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Texas Tech. Very good, very poised quarterback. He's a senior transfer. They finally figured out that quarterback situation. That was the biggest thing. That Park kid, he didn't have it. I don't know why they ever thought he did, but the Kemp guy's really been able to manage games, and the defense has looked really good. Matt Campbell's doing great over there. Southern Cal, I got at 17. They're kind of one of those teams that you usually would have at pretty much at the top of this if they would have played a little bit better in a couple of these games. But yeah, they're 7-2, and they got Arizona this next week, a game I think they're going to lose. So that might drop me even more. Mississippi State, I hadn't had Mississippi State, but when you look at Mississippi State, they're 6-2, and their only losses are to Georgia and Auburn, 2 really good teams. So I went ahead and brought them pretty high into here. They have that win against LSU, at LSU, I think it was. Might be mistaken, might not have been at LSU, but they got a big win against LSU. I got them at 18. They beat A&M pretty handily at home last week. They've been impressive in their games other than the 2 of the Georgia and the Auburn game. The 2 games that I'm like, all right, let's see how Mississippi State is. They get slaughtered. Kind of like defeats how I think about them when they get slaughtered like that because I can't really just like, all right, yeah, let's go. Like, yeah, go ahead. Like, let's put you up in here somewhere. So, yeah, I put them at 18. They have their non-bad losses are a reason that you can put them as high as 18. 19, I've got Arizona. Been very impressed with Arizona. Arizona's been in my top 25 for the last 2 weeks. It's just Khalil Tate, and then the ability to just not be one-dimensional, not just be about him, be able to pass the ball, be able to hand off to your backs. Defense is playing pretty good. Don't forget about how good the defense is is playing. Arizona, every year, as I said a couple weeks ago, every year the Pac-12 has a team that just comes out of nowhere. You're like, what the fuck? How'd they get here? And then, like, Arizona is going to be that team this year. They got USC this next week. I think they beat USC. And then they have like 3 more games. I think 2 of them are pretty winnable. So I would not be surprised to see Arizona continue to move up through this. I don't see them, competing for a playoff or anything, but they're definitely in my top 25. NC State is at 20. Tough loss against Notre Dame last week, but they're still in my top 25. 6-2 on the year, pretty good record. They have Clemson on the schedule next. We'll see how they do against Clemson. Stanford Cardinal. Tough game against Oregon State. We saw how important Bryce Love was. Good defensive team. Terrible quarterback for Stanford. Their situation is just terrible because they don't have a quarterback. It's real tough there. But if they can run the ball behind Bryce Love, they're a pretty good team. I got them at 21. 6-2 on the year. They've had a pretty solid season. They're definitely a top 25 team. LSU at 22. LSU, when they lost to Troy, really wanted to drop them out and leave them out and not ever talk about them again. But they got a really big, cool. It was a pretty cool win over Auburn. A comeback from behind. And they're 6-2 on the year. Only losses are to Auburn, or not. They didn't even lose to Auburn. They lost to Troy. And they lost to Mississippi State. So 2 not terrible losses. I mean, the Troy loss was bad, but Mississippi State's not that bad of a loss, as good as they've been. And then 23, I got Memphis. Memphis is 7-1. They beat UCLA, one of the bigger Power 5 school, which was a big win. And then their 1 loss is to UCF. UCF slaughtered them, but it was a good game. Better game for UCF, I'd say. But Memphis has done good this year. Got nice prospects that I like. I want to keep them on the forefront. I want them to get drafted. Memphis at 23. Washington State, Cougars, I got them at 24. They are 7-2. They have won a good amount of games this year. They've looked pretty good. 7-2 is a pretty good record. By the end of the year, they'll probably be 8-4 or 7-5. And they got a couple tough games coming up. But they're definitely 24. They'll probably bounce out of the top 25 in the next couple weeks if they're not in at this first go around. But they're a pretty good team. And then 25, I got Michigan State. Michigan State did lose last week. They lost to Notre Dame and Northwestern on the year. But they've been impressive at times. They did beat Michigan. They knocked off Michigan. Their defense is real resilient. They're a fun team because they're really young. They shouldn't be good, or they shouldn't win like these close games that they're winning that they are. So I got Michigan State at 25. And as the year, I see Michigan State kind of falling out after this week when they lose to Penn State. But pretty remarkable season for Michigan State, I'd say, just because. I wouldn't expect them to be any good. Their defense is led by a sophomore linebacker. Their offense is led by a sophomore quarterback. So pretty cool little story there for Michigan State this year.